Then we will move on to the second part of the this session with the last presentation of this morning. What do we do when pollution is too great in scope and it cannot be mastered? What do we do? We saw during recent pollution events in Peru, for example. It was also the case in 2021 from the Express wreck as well, or the grounding on the coast of Mauritius. Each time Cedre sent its experts, our experts, and we are going to, this is coordinated by the United Nations, and we're going to hear from Mrs. Charlotta Benedek, who's the head of UNEP OCHA, the Joint Environment Unit, to explain how help and assistance is provided on an international level. And then we'll also hear from Hassan Partow, who was the head of the mission to Sri Lanka.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here with you for 10 minutes or so. I'll be talking and then I'll handing over to my colleague Hassan Partow. So I'm here on behalf of the UNEP OCHA Joint Environment Unit, where I'm the head. And we are a joint endeavor between the UNEP, the UN Environment Programme, and OCHA, which is the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. And we combine the mandate of these two organizations. So we have the technical expertise of UN Environment and the coordination and humanitarian mandate of OCHA. We have been around for quite a while. We were founded in 1994 following a couple of big chemical accidents, the Chernobyl, which is in the news again, unfortunately, and Bhopal and other events where it was felt that there wasn't a mechanism to respond to the environmental dimension of emergencies. So that's where we came in, and since the start, we've deployed to around 230 events in over 100 countries, and responding to both the effects of natural hazards such as cyclones, earthquakes, hurricanes, but also to man-made disasters, and including obviously maritime disasters and oil spills, which is our focus of the discussion today. We also have another pillar, which is sustainability, and I won't speak much to that today because it's not the focus of our conversation, but we are engaged in making sure that humanitarian action is sustainable. We work a lot on mitigating the effects of climate change and making sure that our humanitarian action is greener as we go forward. But as we are talking about today, we're talking about emergency response. And what we do, and it was touched upon just in the introduction, what we do is we're part of the rapid response mechanism that OCHA has to its disposal. And we deploy really in the first hours after an emergency, together with the standard sort of OCHA teams. So OCHA has disaster assessment and coordination teams. We are the Secretariat for Urban Search and Rescue teams, etc., etc. And we then deploy together with these teams to do the rapid environmental assessment. We do on-site sampling, and we can also provide remote support, which we've seen quite a lot of during the past couple of years when it was difficult to travel. Though we did actually deploy quite a number of times during COVID, including to Mauritius for the grounding of the Vakasho vessel. What we do, because we're a small team, so we're only a few people sitting in Geneva, but we work on a network model with a number of response partners, and you'll see them on the screen. So one of the biggest ones is through ECHO, and that's where Cedre comes in with actually supplying countries, but through our coordination with the expertise that they need. And that's how we can actually provide the support that we do to affected populations and affected countries. And this is something that is provided free of cost to member states and to affected areas, thanks to these networks that we work with. This is just a little bit of the latest missions that we've had. So you see them up on your screen. I think Peru was mentioned just now. That's obviously one of the later one that we had, which followed the earthquake and tsunami over in Tonga. So it's just a very interesting view on how connected the world is, and how something happens in one part of the world has these devastating effects in another part. You'll also see the Mauritius there, and you'll see the Sri Lanka vessel that Hassan will speak more to. Again, here's also some of the ones that we've done. These are you've seen we were in Beirut after the explosion, we went to Haiti, etc., etc. So that's sort of what we do. And the other one that I might want to just slightly mention is the FSO Safer, which might be of interest to this group in Yemen, where we are part of a watchtower operation. We just gather upstream, and in terms of planning, sort of the relevant colleagues and relevant organizations who may come into play should something happen, and we're trying to be prepared for whenever we can have access to the FSO Safer in Yemen, and obviously making sure that contingency plans, etc., are done should something happen. The other thing, and I'll leave the sort of case study to Hassan. I just wanted to finish with a couple of other things that might be interesting for participants to this call. So one is the training of experts that we run. We have a flagship training called the Environment and Emergencies Training, supported by ECHO, by the European Union Civil Protection Mechanism. We haven't been able to have it due to COVID for a while, but we are planning to have it. So this is something where we actually, and it's the announcement comes out through ECHO, where experts in their field come together with us for 5 days of quite intense training to make sure that when experts are deployed, who may not have had the opportunity to deploy to these types of settings before, but being experts in their field, then get a sense of how it is and what it entails to actually be deployed on a UN mission. So we do that, and we also participate in a number of other trainings, but this one is the one that I think might be most relevant to participants on this call today. And then just very briefly, this might also be something that's interesting for participants to join, and it relates to our sustainability pillar, but we do run something called the Environment and Humanitarian Action Network, where we come together 5 times a year approximately to discuss issues of common concern, and it's open for everyone. You don't need to have your organization behind you. You can join as an individual expert, and if someone is interested to join, then on the last slide there is our email address, and you can just contact us to hear more about it. And then finally, just two platforms that we're running on resources. One is our EE Center, which really has information, tools and training on deployment and on the actual emergency side of our business. And then the EHA Connect, which is a one-stop shop for humanitarians, basically, on how they can use resources to organize their humanitarian action in a more sustainable and environmentally friendly way. That was what I had to share with you today. So there, I'm just putting that up since you can see our email address in case you want to get in touch. And with that, I am very happy and pleased to have Hassan here. Hassan, who is our colleague in UNEP and who was the team leader for the Sri Lanka deployment that he will now share with us.
Thank you, Charlotte, also. So my name is Hassan Partow, and I work with the UN Environment Program and with the Disasters and Conflicts Branch, also based in Geneva, covering recovery and response to conflicts and disasters. And it's a great pleasure for me to be participating in this Cedre Information Day. So I'll jump into an example of an incident just to show maybe how things play out in reality. So as background, the MV Express Pearl was a cargo ship that caught fire and burned for around 2 weeks, from May 20th to the 2nd of June in 2021, before it finally sunk around 19 kilometers from the coast of the port of Colombo in Sri Lanka. And the main issues there was the bunker fuel oil aboard the ship, the dangerous goods, which included some around 15 different products, including 25 tons of nitric acid, caustic soda, methanol, epoxy resin, and also a huge volume of plastic noodles, around 1,680 tons. So this triggered a request from the government of Sri Lanka to both the UNEP OCHA Joint Environment Unit and also directly to the UNEP Executive Director for International Assistance. And based on this, the UNEP OCHA Joint Unit then, through its emergency response roster that Charlotta just described, made a call, and the European Commission, through DG ECHO, mobilized 3 experts to assist in the response. And on the ground, the whole operation was coordinated by the head of the UN system in country, the resident coordinator, as we call her, and to actually manage our mission with the country and other partners. So it was a team of 4 people. It included 2 experts, actually from Cedre, a marine litter expert, Camilla Croix, and also an oil and hazardous and noxious substances expert, Stéphane Lefloc, and from the Italian Ministry of Environment, we had Luigi Alcaro, who is a marine environmental impact assessment specialist, and myself as the team kind of coordinator. And of course, it's also important to mention here that we were supported by kind of a deep backbench of scientific experts at our respective head offices, with whom we consulted, peer-reviewed questions, sought additional references and analysis of satellite imagery and so forth. So the main aims of the mission was to really identify and scope what are the main environmental issues of concern stemming from this incident, then providing advisory support on how to reduce these risks, both in the short and longer term, and also provide overarching recommendations to the government of Sri Lanka on how they can strengthen their national capacity to manage such incidents in the future. The key activities that were carried out by the mission was obviously first is to do a review of the technical documentation, which we had received from the government as well as other sources. In country, we had a really intense series of consultation meetings with with over 20 institutions, mainly from government, but also NGOs, academia, and research institutes. We carried out aerial and boat reconnaissance visits to the shipwreck, mainly to see if the status of the release of oil and other substances, pellets, etc. And we conducted walkover site visits and boat tours around the impacted coastal shoreline. And we also reviewed analysis of the satellite imagery. I think this case stands out by its complexity. It's not only an oil spill, but it was, as mentioned, combined with hazardous and noxious substances. There was huge volumes of plastic pellets, many of which were burnt. So we had all this burnt debris that also needed to be managed. And then there was the whole question of the wreck and the containers which fell off board and which had traveled also significant distances. And then there was the air pollution that was also generated from the burning of the vessel. So really a broad spectrum of issues, which made this quite a complex case. Even though the fire was under control within around 10-12 days, it was still, when we arrived, a kind of an evolving disaster, because the issue about the potential leak of the oil from the vessel continued. There were still the containers which could also be continuously releasing chemicals into the ocean. And then there was also all of the plastic pellets which were also out in the ocean, and this would continue to play out for some time. The impacts were, in terms of geographic bounding, was still not clear, but the modeling of the currents showed that the pellets would make landfall all the way from Somalia to Malaysia. So there's also important transboundary dimensions. The logistical constraints related to the COVID were also important, because the country was in full lockdown when we arrived. So we were put into this biobubble protocol, and were exceptionally let into the country. But nevertheless, we were able to have the meetings and visit the relevant sites. And then the case also was highly sensitive, in that it was really under in the public eye. There were many people who had their livelihoods impacted, because a large zone was 100-kilometer zone was declared as a no fishing area. So there's many issues related to the compensation claims, and then also a criminal inquiry was opened. I think in terms of the impacts of the outputs really of this mission, is that we really focused in the beginning on trying to reduce the risks from the incidents. For us, first and foremost, even though the relative amount of oil, the bunker oil, was not huge, and there was kind of debate whether the bunker oil had been burnt or not during the fire. Our position was that we should err on caution and take the precautionary approach, and try to eliminate the risk as much as possible. And I think there we helped the government really in negotiating with the ship owners and the maritime insurance to ensure that the response equipment be mobilized on site, and it was brought from Singapore just in case there is an oil spill. Better to be so as not to be sorry, and then also develop a shoreline oil spill response plan in the event of a slick reaching the shore. In terms of the plastic pellets, there were huge amounts which came onshore, in some cases up to 2 meters deep. Most of the pellets was deposited on the sand surface. Some of it was buried deep in the soil profile, 50 centimeters up to a meter or more. And then there was also this issue of this brittle plastic residue from the burnt plastics as well. So first and foremost, what we emphasized was the need to do a chemical analysis of the pellets and burnt plastics to understand if they're dangerous or not, and that will have big implications on the whole disposal and the end fate of this waste. And then there were a range of technical recommendations which we provided, including on favoring site flotation to reduce the amounts of sand which are removed, and also considering the environmental impacts of the cleanup techniques themselves. I guess this goes back to the point which was raised by Peter in his own presentation about NEBA, and this kind of constant question of how clean is clean. We also worked closely with the national committee, which was set up to do the environmental damage assessment. They were overwhelmed by the scale of this incident. The pellets had landed, over a stretch of coastline reaching up to 750 kilometers. So we tried to work with them in breaking up the assessment, really focusing on, in the immediate term, on the priority hotspots, which was the wreck itself, where there were still potentially chemical substances in the containers being released, as well as on the shoreline, which received most of the plastics and debris, and then have the medium and kind of longer term assessment, which would look at the sediments and the benthic biota and other aspects which are clearly important, but more in the over the longer term. Another key risk that we stressed, and which was not really on discussion when we arrived, was what would be the fate of the wreck and the containers. At the time when we were there, it was the monsoon season, so this was had been deferred. But we emphasized that it is really important that a roadmap or a plan be developed on the removal of the wreck and the container right from the outset, and that a proper plan is made to decommission the wreck and containers and manage that whole waste stream, and to ensure also that the government maintains oversight of this process. So at the end of the mission, this took on greater importance, and that line of work has progressed well. I understand that now around 80% of the wreck and containers have been removed so far. And then to conclude, just to say that the mission ended with presentation of its findings and recommendations to an interministerial committee on the Express Pearl, which was chaired by the Minister of Justice and included 5 other ministries. We prepared a detailed report of our mission's findings and recommendations, which we also submitted to the government, and which also included a recommendation on setting up a strategic maritime disaster plan and center to deal with these more complex types of incidents, especially as Sri Lanka is vying to become a major transport hub in the Indian Ocean. And then maybe finally to conclude and say that I guess this incident really also highlighted the importance of plastic pellet pollution. We had the oil spill response people there, but a lot of them actually transferred their skills and moved on to dealing with plastic pellets. And there is an initiative currently ongoing by Sri Lanka to have plastic pellets reclassified as a hazardous substance under the IMO's Dangerous Goods Code. Thank you for your attention.